Hello and welcome again to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay and today our guest is Vidyamala Burch. Hi Vidyamala.
Yeah.
And Vidyamala is the founder of Breathworks and has written quite a fascinating book called Living Well with Pain and Illness. And we're going to basically hear her story and how she's really come to terms with some very difficult personal circumstances and how she now teaches that and helps people in the world with similar situations. So let's start at your beginning when life really changed for you. I think it was, you were 17 years old, weren't you?
I was 16, yeah. So I was brought up in New Zealand in the 60s. So it was quite a privileged childhood, very active, very sporty, running around the place. And then when I was 16, I was lifting someone out of a swimming pool during life-saving practice. And my back just started to hurt, so it wasn't a big dramatic kind of fracture at that time, but an insidious onset of discomfort and pain. And it turned out that I had a condition which is called Spondylolisthesis, very long name,
right,
where the body of the vertebrae fractures and shunts forward on the vertebrae below, which is actually quite common, but I had it quite severely. So 6 months later I had major surgery to fuse that part of my spine. But unfortunately there were complications from the surgery. So then 6 months after that I had to have further surgery to decompress the nerves down my legs. And that was the beginning of having chronic pain.
And when you're a teenager and you want to be active and out and go out having partying and dating and things, that's very restricting, isn't it?
And I had a body cast and corsets and all those sorts of things, which is when you're a 16-year-old girl is very, very challenging.
So how did that affect you psychologically?
I think I became quite withdrawn and I went through a major identity crisis. I went from being a really quite successful sports girl to being a girl who couldn't play sport anymore. And interestingly, one of the things I discovered at that time was photography. I fell in love with photography. And I had so many months off school because of the surgery and the treatments and so on. And when I did go to school, I would hang out in the dark room at the back of the science lab. And I find that very, very symbolic. It's like I went into a dark room, hid from the world, and created this fantasy reality through my photography. So I found that quite interesting.
But you had this capacity at that age to adjust, didn't you?
To some extent, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't like to say I adjusted well at that age because I did struggle. I think I had a sort of heroic archetype, and I thought if I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, I would overcome.
So you were quite strong inside in one way.
Yeah, I'm a very sort of driven person, I would say, which is a strength in some ways, but also I pushed myself too hard in those years. So my body couldn't recover as well as I think it might have done if I'd been a slightly more moderate character. On the other hand, it's very understandable. You're a teenager and you want to live a life. Exactly. Yeah. And you think, well, if I just keep pushing through this, I will overcome it. That's a reasonable thing to assume. But with the kind of condition that I had, that wasn't to be the case. It became very chronic and very established. Yeah. And
then I think 7 years later there was something else that happened that was even more dramatic, wasn't it?
That's right, yes. I was driving back from my parents' house to another city where I lived on New Year's Day. I was rather hungover, having been out the night before. And the guy who was driving the car went to sleep at the steering wheel, and we drove into a telegraph pole at the side of the road, on the open road. And I had a smashed collarbone, I had concussion, I had very bad whiplash, and also my back was very, very painful. And a couple of years later, when a surgeon looked back at the x-rays from that time, he identified another fracture that I got in that car accident.
So for 2 years you were actually living with a fracture in the spine and no one was aware of that?
Exactly, yeah. Because I had back pain anyway, I think they just looked at the x-rays and thought, well, it's no wonder she's got back pain. And I'm not sure that they could have treated it other than rest, but it was very, very tough. And if you've had your spine fused and then you get whiplash, you don't want to have that, if at all possible, because there's nowhere for the impact to go, nowhere for the shock to go. It just gets locked in your spine. So really, since that time, my pain's been really quite severe.
So what happened in those 2 years? You were just trying to get on with life again?
I was,
I think you were working in the film industry,
I was
you?
working in the film industry in New Zealand, where the minimum contract is 60 hours a week. So I was immersing myself in
long
my
hours,
work.
aren't they? Yeah.
I was just trying to, in a way, I was running away from myself. I thought
Yeah.
if I just kept working, I could escape my situation. So I think I had about 6 months off work after the car accident. Then I went back to working 60 hours a week, and I couldn't sustain it. So after about 18 months, I think I had some kind of a physical breakdown. I got to a state of complete exhaustion, and went to see a surgeon. And he said to me he wanted to do more investigations, more tests. But initially just to go home, go to bed and have complete bed rest for a couple of weeks and then go back to see him.
Right.
And I went to bed and basically that was it. I was so exhausted and so depleted physically that when I finally stopped and went to bed, I collapsed.
So it all caught up with you?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that must have been quite a shock, actually.
Yeah, and I was 25 at that point.
Yeah.
So I was facing a loss of my career, loss of my identity, loss of financial security, and this intractable back pain. And I was just beginning to realise, I think, that I couldn't run away from it forever. It's like you run and you run and you run, and eventually you hit a wall, don't you?
Yeah.
And there's a time of reckoning, and you think, well, actually, I'm going to have to face up to this situation.
So as you were lying there in bed, what was going through your mind?
I think initially a lot of fear. You know, what am I going to do with my life? Well, I suppose initially I was so exhausted, there probably was just a sense of a sort of blankness, I think. But then as I gradually got my energy back, and my back was not getting better,
yes.
So I had many months in bed at that point, there was a sense of, what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
Where am I going to go with this? Yeah.
So, and then I think it was shortly after that you had a bladder, I think, going on with your bladder as well. And they said you actually had to sit upright for 24 hours. And actually been lying down for months and months.
Exactly.
And you thought you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But they said you had to do it because you might die otherwise because of the whole bladder problem.
Yeah.
So you were sitting upright. And this is quite a process, wasn't it? Just talk us through that.
Well, what happened is I had a treatment which was quite a standard treatment of having cortisone injections into my spine at the hospital. And they went wrong, unfortunately. So my bladder stopped working. So I was admitted urgently into hospital. And they didn't really know what was happening. And of course that was very, very frightening. 25 years old, paralysed bladder, chronic pain, exhaustion. And after about 2 days, they took me into a neurosurgical intensive care ward and didn't really tell me why. So that was very frightening. And then I had this particular test where they put dye in the spine. And it's not that I would die if I couldn't sit up for 24 hours, but more that I would get a very, very bad headache.
Okay.
So you're told you have to sit upright as a result of the test. And I hadn't sat up for months, you're quite right. And these days in hospital you have very fancy beds to prop you up. But this was 25 years ago. So I had a few pillows, I think, but it was very, very tough. So there I was in the middle of the night, trying to sit up. Very, very frightened, very exhausted, intensive care ward. And it was a very, very fascinating and life-changing experience, because it was like I had these two different me's inside of me, if you like, two different parts of me.
There was voices, different
voices in my head. One part was the very determined, sort of pushy part of myself, which was just saying, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And another part was a more vulnerable, probably realistic side, that was saying, I can't do this, I can't bear this, I cannot get through till morning. Yes, you can. I cannot get through till morning. Yes, you can. I'm going to go crazy. You can do it. So it was like getting tighter and tighter and tighter.
I think a lot of us know this. I know these voices. I think it's a very human thing.
I think it is.
This.
You have it. You have a sort of, we're not totally integrated beings, are we? So I had these two different sides of myself in tremendous battle. That's what it felt like. As an image, it was a bit like having a vice tightened on my head, is what it felt like. I was totally in my head. And it was getting tighter and tighter, more and more desperate. And then a third voice came in, that's how I perceived it, as another voice
Yes.
with a very, very strong message.
So when you say voices, we want to underline, these are voices inside you.
Definitely.
It's internal dialogue.
Internal dialogue.
Yes,
And it was like another more intelligent part of me, perhaps, suddenly broke through, like you coming into that
Yes.
darkness with a bit of light. And the message was, you don't have to get through till morning, you just have to get through this moment. You don't have to get through till morning, you just have to get through this moment. And my experience completely changed. It was the most extraordinary experience I've had in my whole life, I would say. So suddenly, I went from being contracted, tight, desperate, to much more relaxed. I wasn't totally relaxed, obviously. Much more relaxed, and with this enormous confidence, because I thought, well, I can do that. I can get through this moment. I can get through this moment. I can live this moment. I can live this moment. And of course, I did get through till morning, and I survived, and so on. And I knew that something had happened that was really amazing, and it awoke lots and lots of questions in my mind, because I realised that the whole concept of till the morning, well, what was that? You know, what is the future? What is the past? It awoke lots and lots of questions, and I'd never thought about those things before then. You know, I've been a pushy, successful film editor.
Yes, yeah.
And suddenly it was like, well, what is the moment? What is the future? What is the past? So in a way, I got through till the morning, or I came to my experience of being a person alive in the morning, a different person from the person that had gone to bed the night before. And my life has been very, very changed by that experience.
And it is so much fear of the future,
Exactly,
isn't it?
exactly, yeah.
And usually
yeah.
we can stand where we are, but we think it's going to get worse.
Exactly, yeah.
And that we won't be able to stand it in the future.
Yeah. And that's all mind created.
It isn't necessarily the case it's going to get worse.
Exactly. You just
it
don't know
what
it
might not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't know what the future holds. All you can live is right now. All I know really is my experience right now as a living, breathing, communicating human being. And the future will unfold, and obviously it will unfold to some extent in dependence on how I behave in the present.
Yes.
Which is where the present becomes so very precious and important. But to start worrying about what might happen in 20 years' time, that is just going to be creating a whole lot of anxiety and thought process that one can be free of. One can be completely free of all that stuff.
So what was the next step for you then? You was obviously still in hospital then. You had a kind of major realisation, and it took time to integrate that.
Certainly it took a long time to integrate. So I'm articulating it now as if it was a very clear experience.
Right.
And of course it wasn't. You know, I was a confused young woman, and I knew something dramatic had broken through into my mind that had a taste of truth like nothing I'd experienced before then. And I had a few other experiences when I was in hospital at that point, because I'd lost so much. I knew that I'd slammed into the wall, and I was going to have to come out of it a different person if I was to have much of a life. So I had that present moment experience. I had another experience which was very, very humbling indeed, where I realised I'd never really taken responsibility for myself.
Now, what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm of the generation of, I'm 50 now, and I was brought up thinking doctors had the answers. So if you've got something wrong with you, you go to a doctor, you go to someone with a white coat, and they will make you better. So the idea of taking responsibility for one's own well-being, that was not something that I'd understood from my conditioning as a young person in my background. Maybe people probably had been trying to tell me that, but I hadn't heard it. And so there I was thinking, well, hang on a minute, whether I have a life or not, it's probably not going to be down to the doctors, it's going to be down to me and how I manage my condition and how I manage my energy and my resources and so on.
That's again a major realisation.
Major realisation, yeah, and very humbling.
Yeah.
But one of the great things, when you sort of slam into a wall and you lose everything, there's only one way, and there's only one way forward. You can't really go down any further. So whatever step you take is a step back towards your life. So you can only take these kind of successful steps. Of, yes, I can take responsibility for myself. I can live more in the moment. So the self-responsibility was a major insight. And then a hospital chaplain came to see me, which was interesting because I wasn't religious at all at that point. And I think my medical team didn't really know what to do with me, because it was obvious that my spine was very damaged and there wasn't going to be a simple solution. So they wheeled out the social workers and the occupational therapists and the physios and so on.
That's
and so
the thing
forth.
is they don't always have the answers. They often do their best.
Yeah.
But if someone's in a very serious situation,
Exactly. Yeah.
It's uncharted water to some
Exactly.
extent.
Yeah. So obviously someone thought, well, maybe we should send the chaplain to see her.
Okay.
Which was interesting. And I'll never forget this man. I really wish I could thank him, but he was quite elderly at the time. He came and sat by my bed. Very, very lovely man. He took my hand and he got me to imagine or remember a very, very beautiful place and remember a time when I'd been happy. So quite a standard visualization meditation. So I took my mind back to the Southern Alps of New Zealand, where I'd done a lot of climbing and tramping or trekking as a teenager and been ecstatically happy. You know, times of just heart-bursting happiness in these mountains. So I took my mind back there and my experience changed. So he got me to remember something and to visualize something different from my experience lying in a hospital bed, and that had a major effect on my subjective experience in the moment. And then he brought me back to my hospital bed again.
So why did that happen, do you think? What was the reason for that change?
Because of what I did with my mind.
Yes, no, I understand that,
Yeah.
but I was wondering what the process is in the mind. So what you're saying is you're able to change the focus of the mind from something that it's fixed on in a certain direction, and then by the visualization, are you widening the scope of the mind, or are you changing the emphasis of the mind?
Yeah, I think what you're doing is you're making a different choice about what you do with your mind.
Okay.
And so I had a very untrained mind at that point. It was a very sort of, when I say untrained, I didn't really even have a concept that I could work with my mind. I just had a mind.
So it showed you had potential in the mind to change situations,
and
to change your thinking, to change your patterns.
Exactly, and to make choices about what I focused on, what I dwelt on.
Right.
I mean, one of the things I teach now as part of my work is a lovely phrase, what we dwell on, we become. So if you dwell on negativity, if I dwell on fear and anxiety about the future, I will become a fearful and anxious person. But if I dwell on accepting my chronic pain in the present as it is, and my potential as a human being to have a free mind and a free heart, then I can have a very happy and fulfilling life, even with a damaged body. Right. And that dear chaplain planted the seed for that whole journey that I've been on since. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I came out of hospital, just to recap, I came out of hospital hungry to explore what is time and space, what is the present moment, and hungry to explore the human mind. These two things that...
And they're big challenges.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how was that? You came back into real life insofar as you weren't supported 24 hours a day.
No.
You had to get a job again, I guess, did you?
Well, I was on state disability benefit at that point, which was lucky. So I came home, I was still very, very weak indeed. And I often say this was a very creative time, and I had a very, very good social worker, a lovely Polynesian woman, very loving woman. And I said to her I wanted to learn meditation, and I wanted to learn relaxation, I wanted to explore the mind. So she'd bring around these cassette tapes and books on meditation. And you see, what I had was a luxury of time. Because I was flat on my back for months, I could spend months lying on my bed looking at the ceiling, exploring my mind. And of course, many people never get that opportunity in life. So I find that very interesting, that these difficulties that I've had, they've opened doors to experiences and explorations that I wouldn't have had if I was just working 60 hours a week.
Yes, on the other hand, you need to give yourself credit that you saw that was an opportunity.
That's true.
Some people just disintegrate into the spiral of despair.
That's true,
and end up victims, which you didn't.
No, I found it was a very wonderful, very creative time, because I was very open. In a way, my whole sort of ego, sort of persona had been smashed in a certain kind of way. So I was very, very open and I realised I had nothing to lose.
Because the things that you thought you were, like at school you thought you were sporty, and then you thought your career is going to be a film editor, that all goes, doesn't it? It's like you have to start again.
Exactly, and start again with these two wonderful seeds. What is the present moment and what is the human mind?
Right.
You know, at 25, and I was a very intense 25-year-old, so it was kind of burning within me, and I would lie on my bed and look at the ceiling and teach myself how to think right to the end of a chain of thought, that kind of thing.
So you're lying there and you're watching the thoughts come, and then you watch them go.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's a very basic meditation.
It is. And learning how to direct my thoughts as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I gradually rehabilitated myself. So I had a physio who took me swimming, and at first all I could do really was get in the water and float about. But after a few months I was swimming, 10, 20 lengths and getting my fitness back. I wasn't in a wheelchair at that point. Right. And my bladder did recover at that point. Subsequently it's become permanently paralysed, but that was some time later.
Right.
Yeah. So I rehabilitated myself, and I had this exciting adventure of the mind. And then I started to do yoga. I had a friend who said he went to a yoga class and would I like to try it. So I tried yoga, found that very beneficial. But of course I did it too strongly. That's my nature. So I pushed too hard at the yoga. So I had to stop doing that after a while. And then another friend said he was going on a Buddhist meditation weekend retreat. This was maybe 2 years later.
Yes.
So I went off on a weekend retreat and absolutely loved it. Yeah. And what was interesting, and I do like to say this to people, that what struck me on that weekend retreat was not the sort of theory of the teachings, but it was the individuals that I met and the qualities that they exuded as individual human beings. And I remember thinking, I so want to be like that when I grow up. Just that sense of these people are real, just without artifice, without sort of pretense, just extraordinarily ordinary human beings. And I felt very, very inspired by that. And that was my beginning of following the Buddhist path, that I'm still a Buddhist in the present day.
Yes, and I think you then moved to the UK, didn't you?
That's right, yeah.
And you were living at a women's hostel in the UK for a time?
So when I was, I first went on my weekend retreat when I was 27 in New Zealand.
Yeah.
But the particular Buddhist tradition that I'm part of is a UK-based Buddhist tradition, and it's quite small in New Zealand. So I came over to live at this residential retreat centre in Shropshire in 1990. Partly, this is quite a funny story, partly because I still really wanted to be financially self-sufficient. I was still on benefits, and I wanted to have a way of sort of supporting myself and being independent. That was important to me. And what kept on tripping me up in New Zealand was commuting, because my back was really painful, and I was trying to be a freelance photographer and doing all these things, and I might go to a job and that might be okay, but then my back would get really painful, and it's sitting at the red traffic lights on the way home thinking, oh God, I've just got to lie down, I've got to lie down. And I thought, well, maybe if I live and work in the same place, I won't have to commute. So this place in Shropshire, I was partly there to run the admin side of the office, and the commute was across the car park. So I thought, great, I'll be able to do that. And of course I still struggled to manage the physical side of it. But that was part of why I went there. And I also went there because I think I intuited, it wasn't conscious, but I think I intuited that I needed to be in a situation that was very intensive in a certain kind of way, for me to really change the things that I needed to change in myself, to integrate that realisation I'd had in hospital. I needed to be in a situation with very loving people where there was no escape. People would...
So you wanted support for the process.
I wanted support for the process, and I wanted tremendous honesty around me.
Yeah. So
people could say to me, Prue as I was called then, why are you cooking the dinner? Your back's really terrible. Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
So when I get into my habits of just pushing.
It's interesting, these habits die so hard, don't they?
Absolutely. I still work with these habits.
It's always this dichotomy, I think, of people who, they get ill, and like a physical accident like yourself, or they drive them too hard and they get exhausted or whatever. And on the one hand, they've got sick because of their drive, and yet it's also that drive, if it's more intelligently focused, they can get them out of it.
Absolutely.
So it's this balance, isn't it?
I know. I see that all the time at Breathworks, which is the company that I run.
Yeah.
And we run 8-week mindfulness courses for people with chronic pain and illness. And the sort of people that get themselves on a mindfulness course, which takes quite a lot of motivation, they're often these kind of characters. So we're all there because we've maybe not managed our health and resources quite so well as we might, being very driven or whatever. But we've also all got this fantastic spirit, because it is a very, very great spirit of recovery, and when you do get out of bed in the morning, that's always handy.
Yes.
We're not the sort of people who will just lie in bed all day and give up.
So you mentioned mindfulness, and mindfulness is quite an ancient Buddhist tradition.
Yeah.
So tell us exactly what mindfulness is.
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that. I think it's extremely difficult to define mindfulness, because you need to experience, I think, to have a taste of what it really is.
So how does somebody watching this on a computer or a TV set or whatever, how do they get an experience of mindfulness? What are the clues you can give them?
Okay, so that's a good question. Yeah. So I would say, can you feel your body?
Let's do it now.
Okay,
so as if I'm the person. So can I feel my body?
So feel the weight of your body on the chair.
Yeah.
So feel the contact between your bottom and the chair.
Yes.
And see if you can drop back into the body, because many of us, of course, are up here. So drop down into the body. And can you feel the breath in the body? So not the breath as an idea, but the
physical sensations,
in the body. Yeah. Now, as soon as you're directly aware of the physical sensations of the breath in the body, you are in the present moment. So you're having a present moment experience, and you're having an embodied experience. Not as an idea, it's not abstracted, it's very present. Okay. And now, just notice what you're thinking.
Well, certainly the more I'm aware of my body, the less I'm thinking.
Exactly.
There's a degree of thinking, because I've still got to do the interview, but there's less emphasis.
Yeah. So your thinking starts to calm a wee bit.
Yeah.
And with mindfulness, it's really just noticing directly, not noticing in a objective, sort of microscopic way, but noticing in a felt, embodied, tangible way what is actually happening right now. Dropping into that experience. And if we do that, we begin to notice that everything's changing. Yeah, do you notice that if you rest on the sensations of weight on your bottom, do you notice how it's not a fixed thing, it's a fluid thing, it's changing?
Well, it's very much so, and it's almost, where does my bottom end of the chair begin?
Exactly, yeah. And the same with thoughts. Yeah. We can get very trapped we sort of fix our thoughts, say panic, anxiety, whatever it might be, as if there's something that's the enemy. But if you rest your awareness on your thinking process, you realise it's changing all the time. There are little spaces in there. And then if you come to your body, the sensations in the body, you can't hold an anxious thought and be aware of sensations in the body at exactly the same moment. You might bounce straight back to your anxious thinking, but you just keep coming back to the body, back to the body, back to the breath, back to the sense of process, fluidity, spaciousness. And if we learn how to do that more and more of the time, we can then get little sort of spaces in our thought processes, our emotional processes, and we can make choices about where do we want to sort of guide our thinking process, where do we want to guide our emotional process. So it's a very creative state, mindfulness, very, very creative state. It's present moment, so you're with your experience as it actually is right now. Because very often we're not directly in touch with ourselves. We have ideas about what we're experiencing, but we're kind of taking ourselves one step away. But with mindfulness, you're just, here I am. I'm talking to Iain. I'm breathing. I've got back pain. I'm holding the back pain with a sort of kindly, inclusive awareness. I'm not shutting it down. Because if I shut the back pain down, then I'd be doing the interview like this, kind of straining away from myself. And probably my voice will go up a wee bit, and I might get a bit kind of...
And that's the temptation, isn't it? When you have pain,
Yeah.
you want to kind of run away
Exactly.
from it, make yourself busy.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
what you're saying is actually the opposite.
Exactly.
You're saying
Yeah.
become friends and meet
Exactly.
the pain.
Yeah. It's a huge paradox. It's very counterintuitive. Who wants to turn towards the difficult
Yes.
in life? Who wants to do that? But if you don't do it, it comes at a great price. You know, in my experience, I could do it for years running away from myself, but the price was a state of collapse. Whereas right now, if I drop into my awareness of my body, the pain is there, but it's not everything. There's also pleasant feelings in my body.
Right.
I'm warm. I've got a lovely feeling around my heart because I'm enjoying talking to you. So there's a kind of openness there. Something quite interesting going on with the sensations of hair on my face. That's quite pleasant. I've got sort of interesting sensations in my hands. That's pleasant. So you hold the unpleasant and the pleasant, and you allow everything to kind of rise and fall moment by moment, rather than doing what most of us do when we're not mindful, not aware, which is something unpleasant arises, and we go away. You know, I don't want that. Something pleasant arises, and we go, oh, I want more of that. So we're living our lives kind of, you know, in this kind of gesture. Sort of, yes. I want that, oh, I don't want that. Sorry, plant. And with mindfulness, it's like you just drop. Here I am. I'm alive, I'm breathing, I'm grounded, I'm balanced, I'm stable. This is a much more stable body language, isn't it, than this?
Yes, and it is this temptation, I think, or draw of the mind, always wanting to be happier than it is. Yeah. The mind's always looking for something. It's looking for bliss or perfection, exactly. Or something better.
Yeah.
And of course, you can't keep always doing that.
No.
So you're talking about something very balanced, and as you say, inclusive. And it still intrigues me, this thing of you're living with a lot of pain, and yet you can genuinely make friends with that pain, and you can live a life.
Exactly, yeah. But we have this thing we call the 5-step process at Breathworks.
Talk us through that.
Yeah,
yes.
The 5-step process of mindfulness. I mean, another way I could talk about mindfulness just very briefly is simply saying being awake. Being awake right now to whatever's going on with a kind of broad, open, inclusive, non-judgmental awareness. Yeah. And we've got this 5-step process at Breathworks to help people cultivate that state. Everyone can cultivate mindfulness. It's not difficult. Well, it's quite difficult, but it's not...
you have to have the motivation.
You have to be
a bit determined, don't you, and put focus there and time
Yeah.
into it. Yeah.
But you don't need a PhD or something.
Right.
It's very accessible to any human being. So the first step of our 5-step process, we call awareness. So it's just being open to the possibility that one can be aware right now. And you see, that's quite a novel idea for some people. The idea that it's possible to kind of live a consciously aware life, rather than you're alive because you're not dead yet. You're alive because you're choosing life right now, and you're choosing to be aware. So that's the first step.
Right.
The second step is very counterintuitive, which is to seek out the unpleasant. Yeah.
So you stop running away from
Exactly.
what you don't want,
Exactly.
and you have the courage to meet it.
Exactly. And very often that means scanning through your awareness and thinking, where do I perceive resistance? What in my body am I holding, or mentally? What is there that I'm sort of gripping around with an aversive response? So you go looking for that, and you breathe into it, and you soften with a tender, kindly breath into that area. So I would do that with my back pain right now.
Right.
Just, instead of sitting on it and then getting all kinds of secondary tension, just let it be there. Hello, back pain. I don't like you. It's not that I like it, but here it is. This is the way it is right now.
It seems to me, one of the things in your book I remember you talking about was, I think we were in hospital, you realised how contractions were very unhelpful. So it sounds like you're giving the pain space.
Exactly.
And if it's got more space, it has less impact on you.
Exactly, yeah. Because pain is unpleasant. Pain plus tension around the pain is very, very unpleasant. And you don't need to do all that tension stuff. You've got a choice.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the second step, is to move towards the unpleasant. But we wouldn't leave people there. That would be a horrible way to live, just focusing on the unpleasant side of
Okay.
life. So the third step is to seek out the pleasant. Be like an explorer looking for buried treasure. So pay attention right now to what in your experience is pleasant. So that's when I notice things like this, my hands are feeling quite nice. I've got this sensations around my heart area because I'm enjoying talking to you. It's very warm in here, that's pleasant. Yeah. And I may not pay attention to those things normally. Particularly if I'm running away from the pain, there's no way I'm going to notice things like how my heart's feeling or that it's warm.
You see,
because I'm in a shutdown state.
You see, I would say this is looking at the cup being half full rather than half empty.
That's right. Yeah.
And the pain is like the half empty, isn't it? Terrible. And the half full is, well, of course, there are other things there, as you're saying, that can be pleasant and in your favour.
Exactly.
If you like.
Yeah. So it's very, very important to learn to pay attention to those things. The fourth step is where we broaden out to have a bigger container of awareness, or a bigger sphere of awareness. This is a very, very important step. So if I was doing it now, it's like dropping back into a broad awareness. The pain is there. I'm allowing it to be processed, to be a flow of sensations rising and falling without this habitual go away. The pleasure is there. I'm allowing it to rise and fall without the habitual, oh, I want more of that. Yeah. And this is I can't really describe the felt quality of it adequately, I think, but it's extremely satisfying as a human being to just be living one's life with this stable, open awareness where whatever comes in, you can kind of meet that. So it's not like a tiny, narrow little person that's being knocked about.
You develop a confidence somehow to handle things.
Yeah. So a good image actually is if you imagine you're on a choppy ocean and the up and down waves are pleasant and painful experiences. And many of us, we're like a little dinghy, sort of bobbing about, even being capsized by our experiences. But if you get to this fourth stage of mindfulness, this broad awareness, you're like an ocean yacht that's just carving through the waves. And it's got this huge ballast. The reason why yachts can carve through waves is because they've got this great depth. So you've got this huge depth of awareness. And also, yachts have got a tremendous height. They can see a long way if you climb the mast of a yacht. So you're developing ballast, sort of vision and perspective on your life. But you're just here right now. Yeah, so that's a very, very important phase. So this is important that I stress. It's not positive thinking. It's not like just focus on the positive and think positive and everything will be all right. Because actually you've still got this jolly old pain.
It's all inclusive, isn't it?
Exactly. So you're open to the unpleasant, you're open to the pleasant, and you're just developing this huge confidence that bring it on, life, I can meet whatever comes along. Yeah. And then the fifth stage, which is, if you like, the behavioural outcome of the other four stages, is choice. So you're learning to live with choice, moment by moment by moment, particularly mentally and emotionally, I think. So you notice, you might have an insecure thought coming in. You catch that thought. You don't have to believe that thought. You don't have to act on that thought. You just think, insecure thought.
So what you're saying is there's something else inside you observing a thought process.
Exactly.
And the thing is not to believe all your thoughts.
Yeah. Thoughts are not facts.
Okay.
That's an important thing. They're just thoughts. It's just your mind throwing up processes based on your conditioning, your past experience and so on. Obviously thinking is, we need to think. Intelligent, directed thinking is terribly important in life. But I read once that something like 80% of our thoughts we've had before.
I think it's probably more than that in my case.
I mean, most of our thoughts are just the same old rubbish, just kind of chundering around. And we often identify with those thoughts, believe those thoughts, and start to act on the basis of those repetitive, unreal thoughts. And then what a wasted opportunity of a human life. When you can be free yourself from being dictated by your thoughts.
And I know also in your book you talked about the 3 stages you went through personally, which were, I think the first 2 took 10 years.
I know.
So you have to really be determined, don't you? Just talk us again through those stages.
Yeah. These stages are very similar to the stages of grieving that someone called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross goes into.
Yeah.
So I talk about my own sort of journey of learning to live well with chronic pain. And the first phase was denial. So that was really from my first injury until my time in hospital when I was 25. And I think I did manage, probably quite miraculously, to keep denial up for 10 years.
Yes.
Just running, work. Thinking if I just kept escaping from myself, it would go away.
So you were young, so you had a certain energy level.
I had,
you don't
exactly,
have when you're older.
exactly,
Yeah.
and a very, very strong will.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the first 10 years. Then I started to explore my mind, to meditate. Very intrigued by, well, what is this present moment thing all about? Started to do yoga, started to go to the Buddhist center. And I tried lots of other things as well. I thought, well, I may as well try everything. So I went to healers of various sorts and so on. And so from 1985 to 1997, I would say, was my next phase, which I call bargaining. So in 1997, I had another big crisis and my back got a lot worse. I had to start using a wheelchair and so on. I'll come on to that in a moment. But for that 12-year period, it was quite tricky because I was doing all the right things. I was trying to work with my mind and so on and so forth. But I had an agenda, and the agenda was, if I do yoga, my back pain will go away. If I meditate, my back pain will go away.
So you were doing it all to get somewhere else.
Exactly. I was doing it all to get to a result that was an impossible result because my back pain was not going to go away. And the tricky thing about bargaining, and I think many of us do this, is that you always feel like you're failing. It's horrible because you're trying so hard to do the right things, but then because the agenda is inaccurate, your kind of motive is impure, if you like, then I do all these things and then my back pain would still be there. And I think, oh no, well, I've done that badly. I know, I better do it a bit stronger, a bit harder. And then, of course, I'd end up pushing myself again. So it's quite tricky, the bargaining phase, because on the face of it, you are doing things that are good for you, So then that went on to 1997 when I had another big crisis with my back. And my bowel became paralysed, my bladder became paralysed, I had to start using a wheelchair. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. I had more major surgery to reconstruct my lower spine. And I would say, and again, that was very humbling because in some ways that second crisis came on because I'd been pushing myself too hard again. And it was like, oh God, I've been meditating for 12 years and I've been doing all this stuff and here I am, back in hospital with my back getting a lot worse. But I got myself out of that hole, and I would say that the last period since then has been an increasing phase of acceptance.
That's the
acceptance phase. So in a way I'm doing the same things, but my agenda is different, my motive is different.
And we should underline that acceptance is not sort of giving up.
No.
So explain how you see acceptance.
Okay, that's a good question because it's not a passive resignation, but it's more how do I accept that which I cannot change? And how do I change that which I can? I mean, it's very like the serenity prayer that Alcoholics Anonymous use.
Right.
Do you know that prayer?
I don't know.
It's something like, Lord, give me the courage to change the things I cannot change, the something or other to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Okay. So you're being much more delicate, if you like, about your perceptions. There are certain things in life that we can't change. So to keep on bashing away trying to change them is futile. Yeah. There are many, many things in life we can change, and we should try to change those things. But you need to be able to discern between the two things. So acceptance in my case is accepting that which I can't change, which is my disability. That's not going to go away. I know I accept that now, and I feel okay about that now.
Because you can still have a life, can't you?
Well, my life has got so much better. That's the paradox.
Yes.
As I accept my back, accept my pain, accept my disability, and set up a life that supports that, that's freed up a tremendous amount of energy to fulfill my potential in other ways, like doing breathworks and so on. And you know, I have a very good.
We've got about 7 or 8 minutes left, so let's try and use that in a very practical way. So, for someone that is, you know, has got this chronic pain, you have covered, you know, very much your story and some detail. But what would be, sort of in a nutshell, your advice? The starting point for them if they're really struggling with pain, and that means they maybe can't work and can't earn money, and maybe they're on their own, not in a relationship. Yeah.
I think that even if you can't get out, so even if you're quite isolated, you can. I would suggest you do what I did, which is just to start meditating, and I would start with the body scan meditation, which is one that we teach and other people teach, because it's a way of coming into the body very, very directly. And of course, that's the problem. If you've got chronic pain, you don't want to be in your body. Who would want to be in a body that's hurting? And then, but because you're not wanting to be there, you're going to be having all these other secondary tensions and so on building up. And I do the body scan every single day, and it's hugely beneficial. And it's a practice where it's best to do it with a LED session from a CD or a download or something. And you just go through all the different parts of the body. And you're not trying to do anything. You're not trying to relax particularly, but you're trying to come into a relationship.
You're seeing what's there.
Exactly.
You're meeting your body. Yeah.
You're meeting your body from the inside out. So it's not a looking in bird's eye view. It's you're learning how to re-inhabit your body.
Yes.
And that can be a very, very powerful practice. So I'd do that. I'd do breath awareness meditation practice, because again, that's in the body. The breath it's not an abstract thing. We know the breath through sensations in the body. And the other meditation that we teach is a kindly awareness practice, which is where one is, you have sort of kindly awareness towards yourself, and then you also think of other people, because we're not isolated beings. You know, I know to some extent what it's like to be you, because I know what it's like to be me. So the more I get to know myself, the more I get to know humanity.
This interconnectedness that we all have on one level.
Yeah. And for those of us with pain and illness, often we're quite interned, introverted, sort of shut down, understandably. So the kindly awareness practice can help you sort of reopen your sphere of interest as much as anything else, to include other people. Yeah,
you are going to record a couple of meditations after this programme, so if people are watching on the internet, on Conscious TV, they can see them there, and maybe if they're shown on satellite, we might be able to put one of the meditations
that would be great.
Well.
Yeah.
So one thing I was also going to mention, because I found it very inspiring, was you mentioned in your book a book by Matthew Sanford, which I actually bought and read, and my wife as well. Also, Renata, she loved the book as well. And it's quite fascinating, because I don't think you've actually met him before he wrote the book.
No, I hadn't. Yeah.
But he went through a very similar process of this thing, and he talks about yoga. Because he couldn't feel his body below. I think
he's paralysed in the waist down.
Yes. Yeah. And he was doing yoga, and he broke some
major
bone, and didn't realise he'd done it because he had no pain. And it is this thing, isn't it? This determination that you guys seem to have, that have these major physical disabilities, and but I have to admire this spirit you have, you know. Because for him, for doing yoga when he's paralysed
I know, and he broke his femur, big bone in the body, partly because your bones get weaker if you're paralysed.
Yes.
But he pushed and pushed and pushed, very like me. But he seems to have developed a very, very deep body awareness through his practice.
And he's a yoga teacher that makes his living, so it just shows you amazing things you can do.
Yeah, so I think determination is a great quality. But I like to think that I've learnt how to bring intelligence to determination, and that's the key. I think
married the two together.
Exactly. Yeah.
So breathworks, you're doing. I think you were saying your book was out in 9 different countries, and you do workshops, or other people do breathworks workshops around the world.
That's right. We've got, I think, trainers in about 13 countries now. Yeah, but we're still quite a small organisation. Excuse me. We've been training people, I think, since about 2005. We've got 75 fully qualified trainers. It requires doing 3 residential weeks and quite a lot of background reading and so on. So it's quite an intensive training. But it is growing quite quickly. And the main thing we offer is 8-week mindfulness courses of 2.5 hours a week. where you learn to meditate, you learn to come into relationship with the body again, and you also learn how to pace. This is very, very important. How to become more even in the way you lead your life. So you get out of this booming and sort of crashing and burning thing that many of us have. So that's bringing mindfulness to daily life.
And are the workshops just for people with pain, or can anyone come along to these workshops?
Well, we run two different sorts of courses at the moment. We run Living Well with Pain and Illness, and we run Living Well with Stress. And the Living Well with Stress is for anybody.
Right.
And we've also done some work with teachers and school kids and so on. So it can be applied to any situation of human difficulty. And as you said before, we've all got minds that want to be somewhere else some of the time.
Yeah, I think the whole practice of mindfulness, or I would call it more being aware. I wouldn't use in my terminology mindfulness particularly that word, but it is about being present and being aware.
Exactly. Yeah.
And seeing the potential that's there in life.
Yeah.
And I know we all forget sometimes, but that potential is always there, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. And it's. I always say to people, this is not rocket science.
Yes.
You know, in fact, I find it quite sobering the way it can be so revelationary for many of us. People's lives are changed by learning these techniques. And I think how sad it is that we're so far away from a natural state of awareness and potential most of the time in our lives and the world.
Yeah, the other side of that is there's more and more encouragement in terms of there's more and more books like your books
That's
out,
right.
and there are programs on TV and discussions and things, and there's groups you can go to. So there's things that, if they want to, that people can do.
And mindfulness is really growing very, very fast in the UK. In fact, there's a big campaign called BeMindful.com, I think it is.
Right.
And they're going to do a big poster campaign all over the country in the autumn. It's recommended by the NHS now for some conditions. So we're cresting a bit of a wave of interest in our mindfulness.
Good. Okay, Vidyamala, thank you very much for coming along and talking to us at Conscious TV. I'm going to show your book again. The full title is Living Well with Pain and Illness, The Mindful Way to Free Yourself from Suffering. So thank you again, everyone, for watching Conscious TV, and I hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.
My name is Vidyamala Burch, and I'm going to lead a short compassion meditation. So to begin with, adopting a comfortable posture, either sitting or lying down on the floor or the bed. And if you're sitting, I suggest you choose a firm chair with a straight back. And giving the weight of the body up to gravity as you settle. Giving the weight up to the earth beneath you. Perhaps letting go a little bit more with each out breath. Arriving in the body. Arriving in the moment. Arriving in the room. And letting your body be breathed moment by moment. Feeling the body expanding a little bit on the in-breath and subsiding a little bit with each out-breath. And imagine that the breath is suffused with kindliness, tenderness, and compassion. So your body is being rocked and cradled by a kindly breath. Letting go of judgments, opinions, letting thoughts and feelings come and go moment by moment, like clouds in the sky. If you've got any discomfort in your body or any uncomfortable thoughts or emotions, then breathing this kindliness into the uncomfortable feelings. Breathing in with a gentle awareness and breathing out a soothing, gentle breath into these difficult areas. And now broadening and opening your field of awareness to include other people in the world. They're all breathing in exactly the same way that you are. They have pain sometimes, they have joy sometimes, just like you do. They want to love and be loved, just like you do. So breathing in awareness of beings everywhere, human beings everywhere, and breathing out kindliness and well-wishing towards human beings everywhere. Perhaps saying quietly to yourself, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be fulfilled in your life. So staying aware of your own body, staying grounded and centered, but allowing your area of interest and compassion to broaden out and out and out into the whole world. A gentle breath, a kindly breath towards self, towards everyone. And very gradually drawing your awareness back to your own body, to the foreground of your awareness. The weight of the body, the shape of your body, the movements of your body with the breath. Swelling and subsiding. Swelling, subsiding. Imagining that you're being rocked and cradled by a kindly breath, moment by moment. And as you notice any thoughts coming into the mind, just see if you can let them come and go. And every time you notice you got carried away by thoughts, just calling the mind back to the body and the breath and the moment. Now beginning to bring this short meditation to a close, and perhaps forming an intention to take this attitude of compassion, of kindliness with you as you go away from this meditation. And this marks the end of this short compassion meditation.